What is up, guys? I'm Speo, and today we'll take a look at some big festival steps. I know we've been dealing quite a lot lately with steps in all the last couple of tutorials, but I've always been using an Antidote patch for the actual steps. So today let me show you a fully Reason 5 compatible alternative to the Antidote, using only a single Thor and getting a quite similar sound. Alright, let's get to rebuilding it. First, you want to chuck in a single Thor. Now, I've been doing a lot of experimenting with different setups, using tons of maelstroms and detuning them against each other, but I've come to the conclusion that a simple setup, so using a single Thor, delivers the best sound and the punchiest and biggest. So, first up, you want to select the multi-oscillator for the first oscillator, and you want to bring the detune up to about 32. Then you want to bypass the first filter and take a look at the envelope, where we'll bring down the sustain all the way and we'll bring down the decay to about 700 milliseconds, and we'll also give it some release, like 1.9 seconds. Sweet. Next up, we're gonna use the second oscillator for a noise oscillator, which will route through the second filter. So we'll hit the little 2 button right here and then back into the amp by hitting this little arrow. And right in the filter 2 slot, we'll chuck in a state variable filter and we'll switch it to bandpass mode. We'll bring the velocity amount all the way down and the envelope amount all the way up. Then we'll set the frequency at about 300 Hertz. Somewhere in this vicinity, and we can also give it some resonance, like 18. Now we're going to use the filter envelope to control this bandpass filter to have a nice kind of noise step go along with the actual oscillator, the multi-oscillator step. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the sustain all the way down on the filter envelope, and we'll give it some decay, like 1.6 seconds, and we can leave the release at 4.3 seconds. Now, if you only take a listen to the noise oscillator, you can hear we've got a nice kind of transient going here. And together with the actual sound, the actual tone, the actual note, we get a nice kind of big feeling to this step. We can also reduce the drive on the bandpass filter that controls the noise a bit, so the noise isn't quite as loud. Alternatively, you can also bring down the envelope amount a bit, so the noise isn't quite as hissing. But I quite like it up there because it gives this nice kind of sharp quality to the sound. Next up, we're gonna use the onboard delay to create some nice kind of delay effects. I'm gonna hit tempo sync as well, and I'm gonna bring down the time to 2/16. And we can leave the dry wet where it is, or put it up to 50 or something. In this vicinity, like 40 to 50. Sweet. Now to widen the sound, I'm also going to activate the chorus effect on the Thor. And I'm going to bring down the dry wet to about 20. You can also reduce the delay on the chorus a bit, which kind of alters the way the chorus sounds. But it's very subtle, so don't mind that too much. Alright, that's it for the Thor. Next up, we're going to create a equalizer. On this equalizer, we'll use the param 2 to reduce some frequencies at about 6 kilohertz. Let's make that 6.8. And we're going to bring this down quite a bit to about -12 dB. Because as you can hear, this is where the harsh high frequencies sit if I do an A-B comparison right here. You can hear we get rid of some hissing, which makes the sound quite unbearable when played loud. And we want to aim this sound at being very loud in a great and powerful mix. So we gotta reduce these frequencies which really hurt when they are very loud. I forgot, by the way, to chuck in another state variable filter in the filter 3 slot and switch that one to high pass mode, because we don't want as much low frequencies in this big step patch. We want this to be really kind of big on the high end, and we're gonna later add a bass to this step section. Like, not in this tutorial, but if you were to make a big track out of this, you would add a bass to a step section that kind of plays the root notes to each step, and that would take care of the lower frequencies. We don't want as much low resonant frequencies in this patch, because we want the steps to be really loud and not have like a big impact on the low frequencies. So we're gonna set the frequencies of this high pass filter at about 213 Hertz. Which just makes the patch a bit less resonant, and you can therefore push it more in the using a maximizer or something later. Alright, next up we're gonna also activate the high shelf on the equalizer, and we're gonna bring the frequency up quite a bit to about 8 kHz, and I'm gonna give it some gain just to boost some of the very, very highs, which I like to do on some patches, but don't go too crazy up there. Like, you can hear I've now boosted far too many and it sounds shit. So we're gonna reduce the gain to about like 4 dB. Make that 3 dB. Yeah, or 2.3 dB. I think this sounds quite nice right now. Next up, we're gonna create a Scream for Distortion unit, and we'll switch it to tape mode as usual, just to give it some tape saturation, which will make the sound even bigger. We'll bring the speed up all the way, and we'll leave the compression as it is, and we can reduce the damage a bit to about 34. This just adds some saturation to the sound. Then we can activate the cut section, and we're gonna reduce the mids just a bit, like -9. I think we have a bit too many highs in there, so I'm gonna reduce the highs just a tad on the equalizer. Sounds much better. Alright, next up I'm gonna chuck in a reverb unit, and we're just gonna use the stock patch, which is called Film Score, because it's a nice kind of big reverb patch, and I like to use it a lot if I'm not using any rack extensions for reverb. I'm gonna bring down the dry wet a bit, and also the decay to about like 50. Alright, now last but not least we want to chuck in the compressor, which will turn this patch into a real nice step patch, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some attack, bring down the release all the way, give it some ratio like of, let's say, 20:1, reduce the threshold to about -30 dB, and now we have a nice kind of pumping compressor, which will give it some nice transient. We can give it some input gain, so the compressor's really working. I might want to reduce the release on the amp envelope a bit, because as you can hear, we've got a really big sound which doesn't really decay. So I'm gonna bring down the release to about 600 milliseconds. And suddenly we have a lot more stabby character to the sound. I'm also going to reduce the damage a little bit on the tape saturation, because it sounds kind of too oversaturated. I'm going to bring up the master in turn. Sweet. I think this is it, and it sounds quite nice, I'd say. So let's try it out with the MIDI notes of the example that I've prepared. Now, as you've heard, you don't want to go too hard on the reverb, because otherwise this will be a very kind of, yeah, well, it will just swim about, and you can't really define the sound if there's too much reverb to it. So I'm gonna bring that down just a bit. Otherwise, it'll be just too undefined. But don't bring the reverb down too much, because, as you know, reverb makes the sound a lot bigger, and big is best. Alright, as always, you should experiment with these settings yourself, then, because, of course, the sound like this might not fit your mix, as well as a slightly altered version of the sound. So don't be afraid to make changes to these settings. Also, if you just download the patch with the Voice of Reason refill, and I'll include this patch when I upload this tutorial. Don't be afraid to open up the combinator and change the settings so you get a sound that fits your mix better, or a sound that you just like better. For example, you might want to like reduce the noise more, so you only have the tonal kind of qualities. But like I said, just play with the patch, and you'll find some settings that'll be to your liking. Alright, thank you for listening, and I hope this tutorial was useful. If it was, drop a like, that would be very much appreciated. As I said, you can download this patch and all the other patches I made in past tutorials using the link in the description to the Voice of Reason refill. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one of whatever you're having.